With the NFL draft roughly 3 days away, can't get here soon enough. Myself and Biff Sweeney from No Fly Zone Radio from across the pond. Well, I guess we're both across the pond, but he's just across the pond in a different direction from me. From Ireland, Biff Sweeney. He'll be joining us shortly. Just wanted to hop on a few minutes early, get some draft thoughts out there. Talk about a few things. One thing in particular that really I don't think has been discussed. We've joked about how insane things have gotten with the Brock Bowers versus offensive line conversation and which one is better. And I think the biggest thing is that the divide to me seems to be among Jets fans is are the Jets, are they building for this year or are they building for the future? Is that what this pick is about? Obviously, whoever they pick will be part of the team now and part of the team in the future. But which pick holds the most value in 2024? Why is that important? If you look at every single thing the Jets have done up to this point, it points toward 2024. Of course, Aaron Rodgers, a guy you traded for, over a year ago now, and he can't be counted on to give you 17 games. You're going to have to need a backup. That's why you brought in Tyrod Taylor. But really, beyond this year, you don't know what you're going to get from Aaron Rodgers because of the fact that he's 41. He's coming off an Achilles. Quarterbacks get hurt. Young, healthy quarterbacks with no issues get hurt. Guys miss games. So you have to kind of approach this like Aaron Rodgers will miss some games in 2024. Is Aaron Rodgers going to miss 2 games? Is he going to miss 7 games? Is he going to miss 11 games? We don't know. Is he going to miss 2, 3, 4 games at a spot that's vital, that's crucial during a playoff push? We don't know. So Tyrod Taylor at some point, I would imagine, is going to be under center. But every other move, aside from Rodgers is a short-term move. They went out and got Morgan Moses, short-term move. Tyron Smith, short-term move. John Simpson is the only guy, I think, who got more than a 1-year deal, and even he was given a short-term deal. So everything the Jets have done up to this point, Javon Kinlaw, every single offseason move, all of them, every single one of them has been a short-term, quick fix, one-term deal, which suggests that is the plan, to approach this season as if this is the 1 year they've got to do something. And that's the right approach because we don't know. As we sit here today now, we have no idea who the Jets quarterback will be 1 year from today because we don't know how healthy. I get that Aaron Rodgers said he wants to play however many years. Fantastic. Will his body let him? We don't know. If he suffers another season-ending injury at some point this year, is he really going to want to rehab at 41 to come back next year and bank on the fact that he'll be healthy? I don't know that he will. So right now, everything they've done points to a 1-year plan. Everything on the roster points to a 1-year plan. So why would you not? Why would you then? And this isn't even about, because everyone knows I'm a Bowers guy. Let's say it's Odunze. Let's say Bowers goes 5 to the Chargers, which could happen. Let's say Bowers goes 9 to the Bears, which could happen. But maybe Odunze falls. So you're the Jets and you're looking at this thing and thinking, what does Rome Odunze do for us in 2024? Versus what does Olu Fashanu do for us in 2024? Well, Olu Fashanu is a guy who might play. I would argue he would. If the Jets were to take a tackle at 10, that tackle is playing this year. The problem becomes, 1, how many games are they playing? Are they playing 2? Are they playing 3? Are they playing 5? Are they playing 10? At what point, how many games does a tackle have to play to make using the 10th pick on him justifiable? I feel like if you're getting less than 6 or 7 games out of the 10th overall pick, you've not made a great decision with the 10th overall pick in a win now year. I'm not talking about 2025 and beyond, because this is about 2024. So do you take that tackle not knowing how many games he's going to play? And the other thing that's being discounted, and I talked about this with Ian Sweeney, who's going to come on in a second. I talked about this on his show last night with him. You don't know. We're all assuming, whether it's Fashanu, Fuaga, whoever, everyone is talking about these guys like we know they'll be a hit from day one. Oh, well, just draft Olu Fashanu and you've got a backup tackle. What if Olu Fashanu is like a lot of other tackles in recent years and he struggles? And he needs 8, 9, 10, 11, a dozen games before he gets his feet under him and you can count on him to be a reliable player every week. Is it still worth the 10th pick? If Aaron Rodgers doesn't get dinged up, but you're trying to keep him healthy, and you lose Tyron Smith, and in goes Fashanu, and they got to play 7 games, and they're not very good for 7 games, and then they go back to the bench for the rest of the year, was that worth your 10th pick? And I get that Bowers can bust too, or Odunze can bust too, or Brian Thomas can bust. But if those guys bust, their offense, their pass catchers, you've got enough in place there that the expectation should be you can have a functional offense that scores points with or without them. It's a matter of getting the offense to go from being a good to above average offense to be a damn near unstoppable offense, which is what I think a guy like Bowers brings if everybody else stays healthy. So no one's really everyone I see having this argument, this Bowers Odunze pass catcher versus O-line, everyone is talking about it as if whoever gets taken is a hit. If Bowers isn't a hit, you can live with that. If Odunze isn't a hit, and I just mean, like I said, by not a hit, I'm talking if these guys struggle early on, if they need a half a season to get their feet wet. Those guys you can live with. If you're plugging in a tackle, just hey man, we need you to be the guy on Aaron Rodgers' blind side for the next 6 weeks, and that guy stinks, and he needs more time. What happens then? I think it's a question worth asking. I've not heard a lot of people talk about it. But joining us now, my good friend from No Fly Zone Radio over in Ireland, Biff Sweeney. How are we doing, man?
What's up, brother? How's things?
Good to have you on. We've actually done this a couple of times, and no one knows that because there were issues with Zoom. We were doing them on Zoom, and they weren't saving, and they didn't get uploaded, whatever. So I thought, all right, well, we'll push it down the road. We'll kick that can down the road and wait till draft time. Because, listen, Biff loves his draft stuff. I love my draft stuff. What are your thoughts? We're now 3 days out. The draft is breathing down our necks. What are we thinking? 10th overall pick. Trade down, stay put. What are you feeling right now, Biff?
I'd love a trade down. And to be honest, I'm looking at the Colts. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for, let's say, the Falcons to go at the end, the Chicago Bears to go at the end, then the third D end is left on the board. And after that, there's a major drop-off with the edge guys. So I'm hoping they get itchy fingers and call JD looking to come up to 10. Let us go back to 15, get what we can off them. After that, it's either Brock Bowers or Thomas for me at wide receiver at pick 15. Now pick 10 if they stick. It's a Dunze number 1 for me, and then it's a coin flip between Ole Fashanu or Brock Bowers.
Yeah, I think you would, and that's the thing. I want people to understand. I've been banging the drum for Bowers for months now, and I don't want if it's not Bowers, if they do get a Fashanu, it's not that I won't be angry that Olu Fashanu is a Jet. Like I think he's going to be a very good player. I think he will be a very good player for years to come. But as I've said, the way I've best described it, at least in my mind, is that it would be confusing because all of the moves up to this point toward we've got to win something. I mean, listen, Joe Douglas has said it. Robert Saleh has said it. We haven't won enough. We need to win now. They understand their jobs are on the line. And that's where the question about Joe Douglas comes in. Because Joe Douglas, you would think, this is, people have talked to me about what Joe Douglas has done historically, which to me isn't all that important because Joe Douglas has never entered a draft with his job on the line. So the question becomes, does Joe Douglas become a new guy and say, you know what, normally I would do ABC, but with my job on the line, I got to do XYZ. And does he go out and take a playmaker like an Odunze, like a Bowers, where, listen, Joe D's an O-line guy. I'm sure he would love to take an offensive tackle. And the only reason, even as I sit here and say that everything they've done points to a one-year plan, the only reason I wonder if O-line is still a possibility, or I should say the only reason I think it's still somewhat of a possibility, you've got Joe Douglas is an O-line guy. That's what he he covets. And 2, we just saw last year. And again, this all comes down to whether or not Joe Douglas is going to change his approach. But we are less than 12 months removed from Joe Douglas going into the first round of a draft and taking a guy knowing he wasn't going to play. He took Will McDonald knowing this guy's going to play less than 25% of the snaps. Now, granted, I think McDonald's snap count was reduced because Rodgers gets hurt. You didn't have as many leads. The plan was probably to have him be a situational pass rusher when you're trying to get pressure on a quarterback while you're holding a lead. They didn't have the leads. That hurt his playing time. But even still, he was going to be majority of Will McDonald's time was going to be spent on the bench. I think he spent even more time on the bench than the Jets had imagined. But Joe Douglas has been here and done that before. Round one, premium pick, early pick, taking a guy who won't play. Now, does that concern you at all? I know you said Fashan who's near the top of your list. But if they were to take a tackle, and if by the grace of the football gods, Moses and Smith end up playing, say, 85, 90% of the games, and that number 10 pick only starts 3, 4, 5 games, is that still worth it in your eyes, Biff?
To be honest, yes, because like that, you can't be fully sure Smith's going to last 17 games. You're not, as well as that, nobody's talking about AVT. He hasn't played a full season in over 2 years, which is a big thing for me, especially going into a year where he's looking to get paid. After that, the Jets need to think down the road as well, because after this season, like, Smith's only on a 1 year deal. So they're going to have a guy coming in next year to fill his shoes. And what a better way to learn your trade is off one of the best ever offensive tackles that played in the league. But in saying that, if the Jets do go for an offensive weapon, I have a feeling they have behind the scenes a handshake with one of the free agent tackles. It's either that or else Joe Douglas has to be 100% sure he's going to hit in a tackle in round 3. Vice versa.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've asked out loud a few times on our show, is whether or not we believe Joe Douglas has something in place with a guy like Donovan Smith or Cam Fleming or Charles Leno or one of these proven veteran tackles who, no, they won't start every week. But will they come on board with the expectation they'll start 4 or 5 games? But of course, again, I think the situation with guard, that could be something they address. We talked yesterday, a guy like Christian Mahogany, one of these 3rd round guys. This is a deep class. A lot of the talk is about tackle and a lot of the talk is about wide receiver, and rightfully so. But I think there are some good guys. I mean, listen, if you could tell me that if I take Brock Bowers at 10 and I don't get a trade down, but then I could get Zach Zinter or Christian Mahogany at 72, that's enticing to me. Although, listen, this team has enough needs. You can't really lock them into any one position. There are receivers I would be happy with at 72. There are tackles I would be happy with. But there are other options, and Joe Douglas is going to have to look at those. The AVT thing is a little bit scary. If you lose him again, you've got to, and this is why, going back, water under the bridge, right? There's nothing you can do about it. But I'd really hope that they would have brought Herbig back when he hit free agency, because I thought he was a solid starter, backup type. You let him walk, and now you're kind of thin there too. But again, there are guards in this draft. I really do feel like the top priority, you said it earlier, I've talked about it many times on our show on JetNation Radio, as much as I love Bowers and a lot of the guys they could have at 10, the preference should be to trade down. They should be looking to add picks, and that will give them the ability to take an extra guard or an extra tackle. Ideally, somebody with that flexibility. Someone mentioned to me earlier, because I was saying how, we talked about him yesterday, Javon Foster. Dominic Pooney out of Kansas is another guy. Played Texas and Kansas.
There's 2 good guys.
Yeah, like Pooney's been worked at guard and center during the pre-draft process, so he's a possibility. And some of the guards you can get lower, some of the tackles you can get later. we've talked about, we talked about Fisher out of Notre Dame, um, you know, the Texas tackle. There are guys out there who you can get in the mid-late rounds. But the problem the Jets have is that they don't have that history, that offensive line coach with a history of developing young linemen. I don't
Not since
have the
Callahan.
names in front of me, but months ago when I was wondering that myself, I looked up the offensive lineman that the Titans drafted while Keith Carter was there. And nobody really jumps out at you as like, oh, okay, well, there's a 4th round pick that Keith Carter brought along and who ended up being a 4th round, or a 4th round guy who ended up being a starter. You just don't see that. You don't see that history with his coaching staff. So does that give you any concern or make you think, maybe you should be spending on offensive line earlier because you don't have an offensive line coach who can be counted on to develop guys?
It's very concerning because you look back and let's go back to the Rex Ryan years, right? When was the last time we had an offensive line, a fit offensive line for 16 games? It's a long time. It's Rex Ryan days. And that was the only time we really brought in, let's say, a guard from round 6 or 7, and he played right guard for years and played well. Brian Winters. See, Callahan was
Who was the guard? Who was the guard they brought in from Nebraska? The deaf kid.
The deaf kid?
He was deaf. I'm drawing a blank. He went to the Bears after the Jets.
Brian Winters.
No, Winters was Kent. I'm drawing a blank.
Slauson.
Matt Slauson.
Yeah.
Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but Slauson, because Slauson actually, the way the Jets ended up with him, they were on the clock in the 7th round. They had everyone on their board was gone, and Callahan ran down the hall and grabbed some film of Winters and played it for the Jets front office before they got on the clock, and they're like, "All right, we'll take him," and he ended up being a starter. Crazy, but yeah, but your point
exactly. But that's the thing, like the Jets can't turn a blind eye to the offensive line like they did last year. They can't do it if they want to do well with Aaron Rodgers. He's the main priority, is to keep him up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's why those veterans, and that's kind of where I am at this point, is take a pass catcher in the 1st round, and since you don't have a 2, and if you don't trade for a 2, then go out and get 1 or 2 of these free agent tackles, and then draft a tackle again, whether it's a Pooney, whether it's Kristen Jones, whether it's some Javon Foster, who we talked about. There are some mid-late round guys where there is some promise, but when you don't have, and that goes to show the value of a guy like Bill Callahan. Unfortunately, he's now coaching with his son, so you're not going to lure him away from anywhere. He's on his son's coaching staff. If you could bring in a guy like that and say, look, we're going to take a tackle, or we're going to take a guard with some tackle flexibility. We're going to take him in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, and we need you to bring him along. You have some faith that might happen. But you just don't believe that with Keith Carter. There's not a lot of reason. And that, I've seen people say, how can you advocate for Bowers when we have an offensive coordinator who's an idiot and won't know how to develop him? Well, who's developing the receivers? They all play that side of the ball. You're going to develop. You're going to draft a receiver.
Who's developing the offensive line?
It does. Yeah. No matter where you go, on the offensive side of the ball, I look at a guy like Jeremy Ruckert. I think Jeremy Ruckert would be a much better player right now with a different team. But unfortunately for him, this is where it is.
Yeah. Oh, Glenn, we talked about it last night in my show. Wide receivers, offensive weapons in the 3rd and 4th round. Now, we also spoke about an article or a video that came out during the week about 2nd round picks that were wide receivers that haven't worked out. And it's mind-boggling compared to even 3rd round picks. There's a lot more 3rd round picks that have worked out than 2nd round picks down through the years. Like, look at us. We had Stephen Hill. We had Mims. Like, I was a fan of Mims.
Yeah, and a lot of people were. A lot of people were very high in Denzel Mims. And what Biff's talking about is there was an episode of Daniel Jeremiah did his pod the other day, and they looked at round 2 receivers. I think they only went back 3 years. They didn't go back very far, but over the last 3 years, round 2 receivers have been a disaster. Well, no, they must have gone further because they did mention Mims. Yeah. but it's been really bad. Like you're more likely to find a guy in the first round or outside of the
Really bad.
second, which is pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
In the chat here, my info says they'll take a QB. I think they will take a QB, but I think it'll be round 4. Maybe with that pick 72, if they like somebody enough. Like if they took Spencer Rattler there, I honestly wouldn't have any problems. Jim is asking, can Morgan Moses move to left tackle? He's never played there before, Jim. He's been a right tackle for a million years. So I don't see that happening. Let's see. Zach Wilson is on his way to Denver. I'm relieved for the kid. Is that a confirmed thing, or is that something we're just throwing out there?
No, that came
I'm
out
not
about
on
15
Twitter.
minutes ago.
Yeah,
what's that? About 15 minutes ago. It came out about 15 minutes ago, Glenn. I'll get it up here now.
Did it? I was eating dinner with the family.
I have it here now.
I'll confirm.
All right.
This is breaking news to me. I sat down to eat dinner with the family. I said, I got to go. I got a podcast with Biff. Zach, what are we doing here? Now I got to Google it.
Right.
What's the story, Biff?
The deal includes a late round pick swap, 6th round for a 7th round. New York Jets will pay some of Zach Wilson's $5.5 million as well. So it's basically a pick swap.
All right. Yep. There it is. 15 minutes ago from Mitch Sweeney with the compensation. Like I said, breaking news to me. I was watching draft prospects, sat down for dinner. And, of course, that's when the Jets choose to make a move. This is according to Adam Schefter. Compensation update on Zach Wilson. Jets and Broncos are splitting the $5.5 million that's due to Wilson. Jets paying half, Broncos paying half. And let's see, that's the financial part of it.
Yeah.
And swapping 6th and 7th, a swap. And is that for this year?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah.
Look, the Jets are
late round pick swap, 6 for a 7. All right, Zach.
I don't think we're going to get much better.
No. I thought the only chance they had at getting better than that, and this isn't something I thought was desirable or that they wanted, but I thought, if you bring him to camp and he has a decent camp and someone's quarterback gets hurt, maybe you get a 5. But either way, Zach's gone. Listen, the Jets said it. Joe Douglas said it himself. We started the kid too early. He was coming out of BYU. He probably needed a year on the bench behind a veteran. Didn't get that. Played for some very bad teams, very bad offensive lines. But the problem with Zach is that when he did have the opportunity, when the chances were there, when the protection did hold up, he just didn't do enough.
No.
So Zach Wilson moves on. Zach Wilson to the Broncos. I think they still need a quarterback though. But listen, when people have said where could Zach go, I've kind of said, teams with offensive-minded head coaches who think they can fix anyone. And Sean Payton, look, Sean Payton's got he's done some good work on offense. Although if you look at his history, Sean Payton's history of drafting quarterbacks, he's not done very well. I mean, of course they got Breeze, but he
didn't draft Breeze.
Right, that's what I mean. I was going to say Breeze was sort of had a few years under his belt, and they added him as a free agent. I think it was free agent, right? He hit free agency. Because he had the bad shoulder or the shoulder injury, whatever it was. So because I forget who I was listening to recently, and there was a quote from Sean Payton. He said, I have faith in our track record of picking quarterbacks speaks for itself. And they listen to the quarterbacks he's taken, and they're all terrible. I'm like, it speaks for itself, all right, Sean. None of them were any good. Breeze is the only guy you had.
This is his second BYU quarterback now to have.
Who was the other one?
It's the guy they used as a tight end, running back.
Oh, is he a BYU guy? I know who you're talking about.
Your man from the Saints.
Yeah. Let's see. Wilson and Bronco. JD Fleece, Denver. 6 for a 7. They really got the better of them there. Yep, 6th round picks is my info. Jets get 275 in cap relief, which is nice because the Jets were sitting at less than $2 million in cap space. Still, they're gonna have to rework either JFM or DJ Reed or something like that. But listen, we all know the big names. Everyone knows the big names, the top prospect. And listen, if you're draft obsessed, people like yourself and me and some of the circles we run in there, Biff, it's hard to find a sleeper because, there was a time when the general public only really knew about the first round guys. Now, thanks to
Yeah.
YouTube and, I use Caddy's cut-ups and, thanks to the internet, I'm watching 7th-round guys. I'm watching UDFAs months before the draft. We all are.
Yeah.
But throw a couple names out there, guys you think who aren't getting the first, second round love, who you think, round 3, 4, 5, I think this guy could be a player. As late as you want, throw some UDFAs out there. Who do you like who isn't getting talked about that you think could be a player?
Who do I like? Well, if we don't get into the second round, Ricky Pearsall is going to be there.
Oh, yeah.
And he's going to be gone. Long gone.
Yep.
I like Jalen Polk from Washington. But the thing is,
running
he's
opposite Rome Odunze on the other side.
Yeah, I like
that
Franklin
whole Washington offense, man. The line, it's no wonder
everything.
They were in the national championship. You tune in to watch them, and it's just playmaker after playmaker after playmaker with a stout offensive line, a bunch of NFL players there. The quarterback can throw it through the roof. They can do it all.
Yeah, Brendan Rice there from USC.
Yep.
The Jets paid a lot of attention to him. He done well, I thought, in the Senior Bowl. You had a good look at him in the Senior Bowl. Played tough.
Yep.
You got Jacob Crowling. Corley's a guy, and I'm hearing it could be a second round guy now. You're really high in him. Xavier Weaver is a guy that nobody's talking about from
Colorado.
Yeah, 6'1". Guy's got great hands. One guy, I'm a big time Alabama fan.
Yeah.
One guy I really don't like is Burton. He's so inconsistent.
Yeah. I talked about him the other day on our show. I didn't realize he'd punched a couple of fans. Not the best look. You want to keep your calm more than that. But just from a skill, the point I raised with Burton is that you look at how Alabama has become just such a wide receiver factory, and they just produce one elite receiver after another. Is this a guy who would have followed that same path if he had sort of better quarterback play? And that was Alabama this year wasn't the Alabama of years past. Didn't have number one overall type quarterback under center. Did that hurt him in a way that previous guys it didn't? I think he's one of those guys that he could go in round 3 and he could go in round 7. Ron here says, I like Rosengarten. Check out Ron if you Google Roger Rosengarten, JetNation. I believe we have a scouting report up on him. He's a guy we really like, and he was on the right side, but of course they have a left-handed quarterback. So Washington used him to protect their quarterback's blind side. I like Rosengarten. When I watched him earlier in the year, I kind of thought, but then I went back and watched him a little more in depth, and I came away pretty impressed. Really aggressive guy, gets after defensive linemen, and he's just. I like his mentality. He plays, he gets after it, and
he's
again, he's a guy who's used to protect his quarterback's blind side.
He's another guy that JD has paid a lot of attention to as well.
Yes, they've met with him.
Yeah, both.
But you got to watch for those smoke screens. Listen. Last year, the guy they met with more than anyone that I can remember anyway, Pro Day, All-Star Game, Senior Bowl, meetings, was John Michael Schmitz. They didn't meet with Joe Tippmann. They didn't talk to Joe Tippmann. He was the guy in the corner. They ignored him. And who do they come get during draft day? Tippmann's a Jet. But look, that's the game sometimes. Sometimes you don't meet with the guy you're going to take, and sometimes because teams know you'll do that, sometimes you meet with the guy you're going to take, you meet 20 times, and no one knows when is it a smoke screen and when is it real. So we'll know in a few days who they really like. But
UCF wide receiver Javon Baker, he's another good guy that can actually stretch the field, and I do think the Jets actually need to inject a little bit of speed into this offense. Luke McCaffrey's a guy there. He's raw. He hasn't played wide receiver.
Converted quarterback.
Yeah.
I spoke to him at Mobile. Really came across as like a good down to earth kid, which you don't know what you're getting when you're dealing with someone from a football family. His dad's a multiple time Super Bowl champion. His brother's one of the best players in the NFL. And he was about as like just cool, humble, down to earth as you could have imagined for a guy in his position. So somebody I'm really rooting for. I would love for the Jets to grab him.
Washington from Arizona. No, I done this last night as well. Virginia.
Yeah,
Malik
Virginia,
Washington,
yeah,
yeah.
Malik.
Yeah, he's another good guy. Really fast, twitchy,
Yeah, I
great
put him in,
hands.
to me, like him and Jacob Cowing, who you mentioned a few minutes
Yeah,
ago.
I
Cowing
think
and
he's better.
Washington are sort of in this. You wouldn't take both of them, but I would
No,
take one or the other quite happily.
yeah,
Washington probably. I would say Cowing's the better route runner, but Washington is the more explosive guy with the ball in his hands.
yeah,
Both of them, plenty fast, plenty 4.4s. Can make plays with the ball in their hands. You'd be happy to have either one of those guys. Especially,
yeah,
look, a big key is Mike Williams staying healthy. If Mike Wilson or if Mike Williams is healthy on one side and Garrett on the other, throwing a slot guy, I would love. And again, if that's where sort of where Brock becomes a thing, because Brock could be a slot receiver. But it's I just have a hard time. Again, having said, I understand you can't rule out offensive line because Joe Douglas has proven he will take guys who aren't going to play in year one. But I have a hard time
yeah,
believing with his job on the line, he's not going to take a guy who he expects to play every single week. And
yeah,
that would point to an Odunze, a Brian Thomas, somebody like that, versus a tackle. And that giving up that 2 for Rodgers is going to sting in the second round. And I think Joe
yeah.
Douglas, is going to be doing everything he can to add a pick in that spot.
Yeah. My last wide receiver, and the only reason I'm mentioning this guy is Jaquan Jackson from Tulane. The reason why I'm saying his name is because if the Jets tend to snap up Michael Pratt
Michael
in the fourth
Pratt.
round,
Yep.
okay, there's his number one guy. And I go back to the Colts. The Colts done the very same thing. They brought in their number one quarterback and they brought in his favorite receiver in the third round, the tight end.
Yeah, I've always been a fan of that. You don't see it often, and I don't remember the first time I did see it as a kid, but I look at that all the time. Every time a team takes a quarterback, I'm like, who was their favorite? Who was that team's favorite receiver in college? And in this case, that's who it would be. And he's a guy, honestly, looks like Biff's hopped out here. I don't know if that was intentional or if he pressed the button, but we'll see if he hops back in. But if the Jets do take a quarterback early on, whether it's Jordan Travis, do you look at Johnny Wilson? Something like that. If it's Spencer Rattler, do you look at Xavier Legette? Or maybe a Trey Knox later in the draft. Just bringing in guys who already speak that quarterback's language, guys who are willing, or who are able to come in and communicate, because you hear about that all the time, right? The importance of communication, really any job, But when you're talking about at the pro level in the NFL, being able to communicate with guys, being able to have a quarterback and a wide receiver on the same page. Looks like Biff is back with us. Looks like we lost you for a second, Biff. But I was just saying that I've always been a fan of that.
Yeah,
And when I
just
look
dropped
at
off.
when I look at Spencer Rattler, I wonder, does that prompt you to get a Legette? You may have to get Legette earlier, but although I think Rattler will go earlier. But if you get a Jordan Travis, you try to get a Johnny Wilson, or if you have Rattler, do you try to get a Trey Knox? Like, just try to get somebody in that huddle who that quarterback is comfortable with, and give him that sort of that safety blanket of like, okay, if all else fails, I know I've got a guy who speaks my language and knows what I like to do. So that's a good pull, because I honestly, there were a few times during the Senior Bowl, when I was watching him and thinking, as a wide receiver, as a day 3 guy to pair with Michael Pratt, he was beating some of these Senior Bowl corners on go routes down the sideline, and he really did show something.
Exactly. And as you mentioned, Legette there, he reminds me of Anunwa.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely.
Legette, I'd be curious to see their measurements. I think Legette might be bigger, but I get what you mean, though. They're really
Yeah.
physical, fast guys. Like, they both, I'm sure Legette ran in the 4.4s. I know Quincy ran in the 4.4s.
Yeah.
And both, built like linebackers, big, strong dudes who play with a sort of a linebacker mentality, which is something I always said about, if you went back and looked at Anunwa in college, when there was a turnover, he would lay dudes out. Like, if it once the defense had the ball, Quincy became a linebacker and he was taking heads off. And Legette, again, same. Can't say I saw that for him, but I know what you mean in terms of body type and play style. So,
The other thing
you know,
is, with a late round wide receiver, this new special teams rule could actually
yeah,
work in favor for the Jets. So that's why, like Malik Washington, Leggett, Jackson, they're spot on guys later on in the draft. Apart from Leggett, he'll go round 2, I think,
Yeah.
or the top of round 3. Is there any defensive tackles that jump out to you in the mid to late rounds, Glenn? I know
Late rounds.
Sweat's after getting into a bit of trouble.
Yeah, that's a shame. Let me pull up the list here. There are a couple of DTs because I like, some of the guys I like early on. I like Sweat. I like a Rororo out of
He's a
Clemson.
beast.
He's a guy who first jumped out at me a couple of years ago, and I thought that he was a guy worth keeping an eye on, and he has been, an impressive player. And there are some people that seem to feel like he's one of the top guys on the board at DT. And listen, a lot of Jets fans seem to be in a little bit in denial. I see these people say, no defense, you can't take defense. I mean, I understand that offense has been the issue for this team for many years, but there are still needs on the defensive side of the ball, and DT is one of them. McKinley Jackson's not a late round guy out of Texas A&M, but I've been talking him up since last year. Tweeted him out, I think, before the season, and saying that, he was probably my favorite DT in the class. Doesn't put up big sack numbers, but, really good player, low center of gravity, explosive, disruptive, more disruptive than productive, as some people like to say. But as far as late round guys, Gabe Hall out of Baylor, he was a guy that really jumped out at me at the Senior Bowl. Probably the first guy defensively, for the folks I was there with, Dom C and Dylan Terman, and we're kind of we're off to the side watching these guys. And the first guy I mentioned, I think, was Gabe Hall. Offensively, I think it was Malachi Corley, because that guy was about twice as big as he was on film. And if you look at some of his Instagram posts, he's put in some work that he has literally doubled his size. But Logan Lee out of Gabe Hall, Logan Lee out of Iowa is a good one. But the guy that's sort of boom, and it's tough to say boom or bust because he'll be a day 3 pick. But Jaden Crumity, who really isn't getting any talk from anywhere, Mississippi State. Just watching the thing that's intriguing to me, he was good in college. He wasn't great, but looking at the way he was used, like there's not a lot of DTs. The way Mississippi State would stand him up and have him sort of drop back and not quite to linebacker, but come off the line and then blitz from that position. They clearly liked his ability to move, his athleticism, which did show up on film. So I think there's something there. And when I look at the Jets defensive coaching staff, and as much as we, whether you like Robert Saleh or not, like, they've done a nice job of developing defensive players. I look at a guy like Crumity and the way he was used in college, and I wonder if the Jets might be able to do some of the same with him at the pro level, or, to develop at the pro level. Fabian Lovett out of Florida State, I thought was a good player, playing next to Braden Fisk. Keith Randolph, another guy, kind of gets overshadowed because he plays with Johnny Newton in Illinois. But those are some of the late round guys that I would look at for the Jets. Again, early, I love the idea, prior to Tavondre Sweat's DUI, he was sort of my preferred guy if they added a second round pick. I wanted him in round 2. I think he can be that much of a game changer. But now that you look at the size, is that a concern? And you look at the DUI, I have a hard time seeing. I heard someone say the other day he might be a day 3 pick now. Which fine is worth that gamble, okay, but that is still concerning. But there are some DTs I would take mid-late rounds who I think could help this team out.
Exactly. Like, at the end of the day, we need to get in a guy beside Williams that's going to grow Williams. Like, we have too many 1-year deals on the team at the moment, especially on the D line. And I'll say one name, because you're after mentioning off a few that I know. Dwayne Carter from Duke. I really like him. Yeah. Run stopper, plays angry.
He does. And Duke did move him around a little bit. He's a guy who's got some versatility, inside, not to say he's like a prototypical edge rusher, but you can line him up in a few different spots along that D line, plays with a really good motor. And he's one of those prospects that the book on him, or the consensus seems to be that he's either, or I shouldn't even say, for those familiar with him, I should say, they seem to feel like he's not getting talked up enough. And that's going to be the fun thing about the draft. And it's always one of the fun things about the draft. is we're going to hear names called way sooner and way later than we think. Like, that's one of my questions right now. I look at this first round and I think, who's the guy? Who is the top 8 or top 10 pick or top 12 pick who's going to fall to 25 or 26? Because we do seem to see this from time to time. And I often have to remind myself, Biff, because there are times I'm watching the draft and I'm thinking, why the hell is this guy still on the board? Why hasn't someone taken this guy? But then I remind myself, these teams do background checks and they have information on these players that we don't. So there might be a guy who we absolutely love. And the team sitting there looking at the report their security guys gave them and going, this guy, he's not even on our board. This guy's done some things that got swept under the rug in college and could come to light. And I'm not saying anyone has, but that's, I think, one of the factors that we often forget is that teams know stuff about these guys that we don't. And again, especially when it comes to sort of character, off-field stuff. And sometimes teams just miss. Myself and Chris Schubert, one of my co-hosts on JetNation Radio, we kind of kick around the joke all the time. Last year, he and I, leading up to the draft, we wouldn't shut up about Ivan Pace, the Cincinnati linebacker. I loved Ivan Pace. And Chris was at the Senior Bowl and I wasn't. And I think it was the first time we had him on the show as a guest. And I'm saying to him, did anyone jump out? And he starts describing Ivan Pace. And before he even gets to the name, I'm like, Ivan Pace, right? And he's like, yes, Ivan Pace. And we raved about the guy. And I said, look, he's a smaller guy. He probably goes in round 3 or 4. Went undrafted and was one of the best was one of the best rookies in the NFL last year for the Minnesota Vikings. So whatever scared teams away, I would imagine size is the only thing. But Ivan Pace is a good football player. And guys drop every year. So it's like, who's going to drop? Who do you have any thoughts? Do you look at this top 10, top 15? And is there anyone that jumps out at you and you say, I think that guy could go later than that?
Ooh. Top 15. Maybe some of the corners or defensive ends, because I do think the tackles and I do think the wide receivers are just going to fly off the board.
Yeah.
Now, a guy that could go earlier than people think it'd be Penix. I think he could break the top 15.
Yeah. Well, Penix or Nix, Bo Nix. I've seen him mocked to Denver a few times.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Bo Nix.
I listen. I like Bo Nix. I said before the Senior Bowl, I said if he has a good senior, I may not even add the Senior Bowl caveat. I watched a few of his games, having watched him at Auburn, watched him at Oregon, and I kind of said this guy could sneak into the top 10. But then his Senior Bowl, he didn't do much of anything at all. So I left the Senior Bowl thinking, he's not going top 10. But a fair number of mocks I've talked about him possibly to the Broncos, to the Raiders, 12, 13, in that range. I saw a number on him the other day, Biff. For anyone who didn't see this, not follow me on Twitter, a Bo Nix stat, which blew my mind. I knew he had great completion percentage. I knew his completion percentage under pressure was phenomenal. And what PFF does and some other sites, they do the adjusted completion percentage, right? They take out the throwaways, they take out the spikes when you're intentionally, which is great because I don't need to know that. If a guy's dirted the ball 15 times, I don't need that included in his completion percentage. They're just looking at when you actually throw the ball to a teammate trying to complete a pass. His adjusted completion percentage under pressure, this is a great number if you're not under pressure. Bo Nix under pressure adjusted completion percentage last year was 80%, which is unbelievable. The next closest guy was McCarthy, who was also really good too. I think he was 75.8. And then he
didn't throw the ball.
Not often. but I look at McCarthy the way I look at Bowers, right? Like we're saying the guy didn't do this, the guy didn't do that. And I just say the guy did what the coaches asked him to. Michigan built the best offensive line in the country. And they said, I was watching Michigan earlier today. Who was it against? Nebraska, maybe? Whoever it was. And they would just line it up and just run it down your throat because they could. And I'm watching it going, should I get mad at JJ McCarthy? Because they built this elite offensive line that allowed them to just run the ball all day and win a national championship. The important thing to me with McCarthy is when he did throw it, he threw it well. He didn't throw it off because he didn't have to. Same with Bowers. All this talk about, Brock Bowers and the screen passes. That's what they threw him. What do you want him to do? He doesn't draw up the plays, and he did catch the ball down the field. They used him in a screen pass, sort of short pass situations more often because they liked him in that role. And I'd say Georgia had a fair bit of success. So I'm not really going to argue with the way they deployed one of their top weapons.
Yeah, exactly. Just before I head off, Glenn, safety. The Jets had it back one of their safeties just last week or the week before. They've 3 starters, and then you've got Converse.
Yep.
The guy we took last year.
Converse.
Okay. I'd love to know what to think of him. Because I don't think they're going to go high. I don't think they're going to go in the mid rounds, but I do think they're going to take safety at some stage.
Yeah, they have to take a safety. There are a few guys I really like: Jaden Hicks, Malik Mustafa. There's some guys who will go in the earlier rounds, but I don't think the Jets will be playing in that range, looking for a safety. Mustafa, to me, and I've been talking about him for a little while. Just a lot of fun to watch as a prospect. Big time hitter, covers a lot of ground. I think he does that better than he gets credit for. I think he's one of those guys that'll be a better pro than he was in college. And every draft you see a few guys, like Theo Johnson's another one. You look at their college production and you're like, man, that guy's better than that. Like, he's gonna have better numbers than that once he gets on the field. So yeah, I think safety for the Jets is an area we'll see them go. Evan Williams out of Oregon is another guy who can go later on. But probably my 2 top guys would be Jaden Hicks out of Washington State and Malik Mustafa as well.
Okay.
But thanks for coming on, Biff.
No bother, brother.
Great having you. And I'm sure we will be having plenty of conversations about how this draft goes when it goes down. We are 3 days away. JetNation Live, we're going to try to cover picks 1 through 257. We're going to go live, me, Dylan, Chris, and we are going to be live nonstop. I'll be hopping out from time to time to hop on some other shows to give some analysis and things like that. And we will be here. So thanks for coming on, and I hope you enjoy it, Biff. And we'll wrap it up. We'll talk about it when the dust settles and it's all cleared out.
No better. Thanks for having me.
Take care, man. Thanks for tuning in, Jets fans. Have a good one.